The bridge of the Earth Defense Force flagship was silent. Admiral Daehyun stood with his hands behind his back, staring at the massive viewscreen before him. On it, 3 alien figures looked down at him with eyes that showed no mercy. They were representatives of the Galactic Council, and they had come with a message. The creature in the center spoke. Its voice came through the translator as cold and sharp. It had skin like blue crystal and 4 arms that moved slowly as it talked. Behind Daehyun, Captain Bora kept her hand near her weapon. She did not trust these aliens. No one on the bridge did. The aliens' words were simple but terrible. Earth had 30 days to surrender. Humanity would give up control of their planet, their ships, and their freedom. They would become servants of the Galactic Council. If they refused, the Council would send their war fleet. Earth would be destroyed. Every city would burn. Every human would die. Daehyun listened without moving. His face showed nothing, but inside anger burned like fire. These aliens thought humans were weak. They thought Earth was just another primitive world to conquer. They had made a terrible mistake. When the alien finished speaking, Daehyun took 1 step forward. He looked directly at the 3 council members. His voice was calm but hard as steel. He told them that Earth needed time to consider their offer. The aliens agreed to wait for an answer. The holographic image flickered and disappeared. The moment they were gone, the bridge erupted in angry voices. Officers shouted about the insult. Some demanded immediate war. Others talked about defense plans. Captain Bora slammed her fist on her console. She said what everyone was thinking. The council had just signed their own death warrant. Daehyun raised 1 hand and the noise stopped. He turned to face his crew. These were good people. Brave people. They had trained for years, always knowing this day might come. Humanity had always feared that first contact with aliens would not be peaceful. Now their fears had come true. He gave orders quickly. Captain Bora would gather all intelligence on the Galactic Council. He wanted to know their strengths, their weaknesses, their ships, their weapons, everything. Lieutenant Sora would contact Earth Command and arrange an emergency meeting with President Minho. Commander Junho would begin preparing the fleet for combat. As the crew rushed to their tasks, Daehyun walked to the observation window. Beyond the glass, Earth hung in space like a blue jewel. Clouds swirled over oceans. Lights from cities glowed on the dark side of the planet. Somewhere down there, billions of people lived their lives with no idea that war was coming. Captain Bora came to stand beside him. She was quiet for a moment, then spoke softly. She asked if he thought they could win. Daehyun did not answer right away. The truth was complex. The Galactic Council controlled thousands of worlds. Their fleet was massive. They had weapons humanity had never seen. But the Council did not know everything about Earth. They did not know about the secret weapons programs. They did not know about the new ships hidden in asteroid bases. Most importantly, they did not understand what humans would do to protect their home. They did not understand that humanity had never been good at surrender. Daehyun finally turned to Bora. His eyes were hard with determination. He told her that winning was not certain, but surrender was not an option. Humans would fight. They would make the Council regret ever threatening Earth, even if it cost everything. Hours later, Daehyun stood in a secure conference room on Earth. Around the table sat the leaders of humanity. President Minho was there, looking tired but angry. General Taehyun represented the military. Ambassador Yuna spoke for the diplomatic corps. Dr. Suman came from the Advanced Weapons Division. They watched the recording of the Council's message. When it ended, the room exploded with argument. Some wanted to try negotiation. Others demanded immediate attack. A few even suggested accepting the Council's terms to save lives. That idea died quickly when General Taehyun stood up. The general's voice cut through the noise like a blade. He said that submission meant death anyway. The Council did not want partners. They wanted slaves. Humanity would work until they died. Their children would never know freedom. That was not life. That was just a slower way to die. President Minho called for silence. He looked at each person in turn. Then he asked the only question that mattered. Could they win? General Taehyun looked at Admiral Daehyun. Daehyun looked at Dr. Suman. The scientist nodded slowly. Dr. Suman stood and activated a holographic display. Images of ships appeared in the air, weapons that looked like nothing the Council had ever seen. She explained that Earth had been preparing for this possibility for 50 years. Ever since humans first detected alien signals, they had been getting ready for war. The doctor showed them Project Thunder, a fleet of stealth ships that could strike without warning. She revealed Project Hammer, kinetic weapons that hit with the force of nuclear bombs but left no radiation. She displayed Project Ghost, a new technology that made ships invisible to alien sensors. But the most important project was called Infinity. Dr. Suman hesitated before showing it. When the image appeared, several people gasped. It was a weapon unlike anything in history, a device that could destroy entire fleets in seconds. Using it would announce to the galaxy that humanity was not prey. They were predators. Ambassador Yuna spoke up. She reminded them that using such weapons would make enemies across the galaxy. Other species might unite against Earth out of fear. Daehyun acknowledged this was true, but he pointed out that the alternative was slavery and death. At least if they fought, they would die free. President Minho stood. The room fell silent. Every eye was on him. The weight of the decision showed on his face. Billions of lives depended on his next words. He could choose peace and slavery, or war and possible extinction, or perhaps war and victory. He took a deep breath and spoke. His voice was steady and strong. Earth would not surrender. Earth would not bow. Earth would fight. The Galactic Council had made a mistake. They had threatened the wrong species. Now they would learn what humanity could do when pushed to the edge. Orders went out immediately. Admiral Daehyun would command the fleet. General Taehyun would coordinate all military forces. Dr. Suman would activate every weapons program. Ambassador Yuna would send Earth's response to the Council. Not a surrender, not a plea for mercy, a declaration of war. As the meeting ended and people rushed to their duties, Daehyun remained behind with President Minho. The president looked at him with tired eyes. He asked if Daehyun truly believed they could win. The admiral was quiet for a long moment. Then he answered honestly. He did not know if they would win. The council was powerful and vast. But he knew one thing with absolute certainty. Humanity would make them pay for every inch of space. They would fight with everything they had. And if they died, the galaxy would remember that Earth did not go quietly into the darkness. They went down fighting, with weapons blazing and defiance on their lips. That would have to be enough. The United Earth Assembly Chamber was packed with representatives from every nation. President Minho walked to the podium with steady steps. Behind him, the flags of all Earth's countries hung in a circle. Above them, the blue and green flag of United Earth moved gently in the air circulation. The room was completely silent. Cameras from every news organization on the planet were pointed at him. Billions of people watched from their homes, their workplaces, their schools. They all knew something terrible was coming. The government had warned them to watch this broadcast. Many were afraid. Some were angry. All of them waited for their leader to speak. Minho gripped the sides of the podium. He looked into the cameras and began to speak. His voice was clear and strong. He told the people of Earth that they had been contacted by aliens. For a moment, hope flickered in millions of hearts. Perhaps they would have friends among the stars. Perhaps humanity was not alone. Then Minho continued. The hope died. He explained about the Galactic Council. He told them about the ultimatum. Surrender or die. Become slaves or be destroyed. The words fell like hammers. Around the world, people stared at their screens in shock and growing fury. The president paused. He let the terrible news sink in. Then his expression changed. His eyes blazed with fierce determination. He said that Earth's leaders had made a decision. They had consulted with military commanders, scientists, and strategists. They had considered every option. And they had chosen Earth would not surrender. Earth would not bow. Earth would fight. The words rang out like a battle cry. In the assembly chamber, representatives rose to their feet. Some cheered, some wept, but all of them stood together. Around the world, the response was the same. Fear turned to anger. Anger turned to determination. Minho was not finished. He explained that humanity had been preparing for this possibility. For decades, Earth's best minds had been developing weapons and defenses in secret. They had built ships. They had trained soldiers. They had created technologies the Council had never imagined. Earth was not helpless. Behind the scenes, Ambassador Yuna was already working. She sat in a secure communications room with a team of specialists. On the screens before her were the transmission codes for the Galactic Council. She had been given a message to send. Not the message the Council expected. Yuna had spent her whole career trying to build bridges between people. She believed in peace and cooperation, but she also believed in freedom. What the Council was demanding was not peace. It was subjugation, and that was something she could never accept. She took the prepared statement and began to translate it into the codes the Council would understand. Every word was chosen carefully. Every phrase was deliberate. This was not just a message. It was a declaration. A line drawn in the stars. A promise of what was to come. The message was simple and direct. Earth rejected the Council's ultimatum. Humanity would never submit to slavery. The Council had threatened the wrong species. They had awakened something they could not control. Earth was declaring war on the Galactic Council. Let them come with their fleets. Humanity would be ready. Yuna sent the message on every frequency the Council used. It would reach their home worlds. It would reach their fleets. It would reach every corner of their empire. There could be no misunderstanding. Earth's position was clear. While the message traveled through space, Colonel Jinwoo was mobilizing Earth's defense fleets. In orbital stations around the planet, thousands of ships prepared for war. Crews ran final checks on weapon systems. Engines powered up. Supplies were loaded at frantic speed. Jinwoo stood on the bridge of the carrier Indomitable. Through the viewports, he could see dozens of ships moving into formation. Destroyers, cruisers, carriers, and the new stealth frigates. Each one was crewed by men and women who knew they might not survive the coming war. But every single one of them had volunteered. The colonel had fought in the border wars, the last major conflict on Earth before the nations united. He knew what war cost. He had seen cities burn and good people die. But he also knew that some things were worth fighting for. Freedom was one of them. The right to determine their own future was another. He received a communication from Admiral Daehyun. The fleet was to deploy in defensive positions around Earth, but they would not wait passively for the Council to attack. Strike teams would be prepared. If the Council wanted war, Earth would bring the fight to them. Deep beneath the surface of the moon, Dr. Suman walked through the most secure facility in human space. This was Research Station Omega, where the most advanced weapons projects were developed. It had been built in absolute secrecy. Even most government officials did not know it existed. Suman entered the main laboratory. Hundreds of scientists were working frantically. They were activating systems that had only been theoretical. They were preparing weapons that had never been tested in combat. The risk was enormous, but doing nothing meant certain death. She approached the central control station where her lead engineer, Minseo, was coordinating the activation sequences. Project Thunder was already online. The stealth ships were responding perfectly. Project Hammer was at 90%. The kinetic weapons would be ready within hours, but Suman's attention was on Project Infinity. The massive weapon sat in the center of the facility, humming with barely contained power. It was beautiful and terrible. One shot could destroy a moon. 2 shots could crack a planet. In the wrong hands, it could end civilizations. Minseo noticed her staring at it. He asked quietly if she thought they would actually use it. Suman did not answer immediately. She understood what he was really asking. Using Infinity would announce to the galaxy that humans possessed weapons of incredible destruction. It would make them feared. It might make them hated. But she also knew that the Council would not stop unless they were completely defeated. Half measures would only delay the inevitable. If humanity wanted to survive, they had to prove they were too dangerous to threaten. They had to show strength beyond question. She finally answered Minseo. Yes, they would use it if necessary, because the alternative was extinction. Better to be feared and alive than peaceful and dead. The engineer nodded slowly. He understood. They all understood. Back on Earth, President Minho finished his speech to the assembly. He had told them everything. The threat, the decision, the preparations. Now he gave them their orders. Every resource would be directed to the war effort. Every factory would produce weapons or supplies. Every able person would contribute somehow. But he also made a promise. When this war was over, when humanity had secured their freedom, Earth would never forget what was sacrificed. The dead would be honored. The survivors would build a future worthy of their courage. And the galaxy would know that humanity could not be conquered. The assembly voted. It was unanimous. Every representative from every nation, every culture, every background voted for war. For the first time in human history, the entire species was truly united, not by peace but by the determination to remain free. As Minho left the podium, General Taehyun approached him. The general's face was grim but determined. He reported that all forces were mobilizing. Earth's defenses were at maximum readiness. The strike teams were prepared. They were as ready as they could be. Minho asked how long before the council responded. Taehyun estimated days, perhaps weeks. The council was arrogant. They would not expect defiance. They would need time to gather their forces. That time was Earth's advantage. They would use every second to prepare. Across the galaxy, the council received Earth's declaration. In their great assembly hall, the council members gathered in shock and rage. A primitive species had dared to refuse them. More than refuse, they had declared war. It was unthinkable. It was insulting. It would be crushed. The council immediately began preparing their war fleet. Ships from 100 worlds gathered. Weapons were readied. Soldiers were briefed. They would teach these humans a lesson. They would show the galaxy what happened to those who defied the council. But they made one critical mistake. They assumed Earth was like every other primitive world they had conquered. They assumed humans would break when faced with real power. They assumed wrong. And that mistake would cost them everything. Commander Hyunwoo sat in the command chair of the stealth frigate Shadow Dancer. Around him, his crew worked in focused silence. They were approaching the council's nearest outpost, a supply station orbiting a gas giant 3 light-years from Earth. This would be humanity's first strike. It had to send a message. Lieutenant Jiwon monitored the tactical displays from her station. She was the best strategic officer in the fleet, which was why Hyunwoo had requested her for this mission. Her fingers moved across the controls, analyzing enemy positions, calculating firing solutions, predicting responses. Her mind worked like a computer, but faster. The outpost appeared on their screens. It was massive, built to service the council's ships as they moved through this sector. Dozens of vessels were docked there. Supply ships, patrol craft, and 3 heavy cruisers. The station's weapons could destroy a normal attack force easily. But Shadow Dancer was far from normal. Hyunwoo studied the display. The council's sensors were sweeping the area constantly, looking for threats. But they could not see Shadow Dancer. The stealth technology Dr. Suman had developed made them invisible. To the aliens, this section of space was empty. They had no idea death was approaching. Jiwon reported that she had identified the optimal targets. The station's reactor would be first, then the docked cruisers, then the command center. The sequence would create maximum damage and prevent any effective response. It was elegant and brutal, exactly what they needed. Hyunwoo gave the order to prepare weapons. Throughout the ship, crews moved to their positions. In the weapons bay, engineer Minseo made final checks on the kinetic accelerators. These were not energy weapons like the council used. They were simple mass moving at incredible speed. Chunks of metal accelerated to a fraction of light speed. When they hit, physics did the rest. Minseo had designed these weapons himself. The council's shields were built to deflect energy. Lasers, plasma, particle beams, all of it bounced off or was absorbed. But shields could not stop solid matter moving fast enough. The kinetic rounds would punch through like paper, and the energy released on impact would be devastating. Everything was ready. Hyunwoo took a deep breath. This moment would change everything. After this, there was no going back. Earth would be at war. People would die. Ships would burn. But surrender was not an option. Better to fight and possibly lose than to never fight at all. He gave the order. Fire. Shadow Dancer's weapons came alive. 6 kinetic rounds launched in rapid succession. They were invisible to the eye, just dark metal moving through the void. But their impact would be anything but invisible. The first round hit the station's reactor. At relativistic speeds, even a small mass carried unthinkable energy. The reactor's shielding might as well have not existed. The round penetrated deep into the core, and the laws of physics took over. The reactor went critical instantly. A brilliant flash of light erupted from the station. The explosion tore through internal compartments. Secondary detonations followed as fuel and ammunition cooked off. In seconds, half the station was gone. Debris scattered in all directions. Atmosphere vented into space in glittering streams of ice. The second and third rounds hit the docked cruisers. Without shields raised, they were vulnerable. The kinetic penetrators went through their hulls like they were made of cardboard. The impacts released energy equivalent to nuclear weapons. The cruisers simply disintegrated. Jiwan watched the destruction with professional detachment. She noted that the timing was perfect. The station's defenses had not even activated before they were destroyed. The remaining rounds hit the command center and communication arrays. Within 30 seconds of the first shot, the outpost was crippled. A few council ships tried to respond. Smaller patrol craft attempted to locate the attacker. Their sensors swept the area frantically. But Shadow Dancer remained invisible. Hyunwoo ordered precise shots on each patrol craft. One by one, they exploded or went dark. Hulls breached, systems dead. In less than 3 minutes, the battle was over. The Council's outpost was destroyed. Every military vessel was gone. Only a few civilian supply ships remained, and Hyunwoo let them flee. They would carry the message. They would tell the Council what happened here. Minseo reported from engineering that all weapons had performed beyond expectations. The kinetic accelerators had exceeded their design specifications, and they still had 70% of their ammunition remaining. Shadow Dancer could hit several more targets before needing to resupply, but Hyunwoo knew they needed to withdraw. Soon the Council would send reinforcements to investigate. He ordered the ship to jump to the next waypoint. Space twisted around Shadow Dancer as the jump drive activated. In an instant, they were gone, leaving only wreckage and the dying station behind. News of the attack reached the Galactic Council within hours. The surviving supply ships transmitted their reports. An unknown vessel had destroyed the outpost. It appeared from nowhere, struck with impossible weapons, and vanished again. Hundreds of Council personnel were dead. Billions in resources were lost. The Council members raged at the news. This was supposed to be an easy conquest. Humanity was supposed to be primitive and weak. How did they have such weapons? How did they have stealth technology that defeated Council sensors? The questions had no answers, only growing concern. They ordered their fleet to advance on Earth immediately. No more waiting, no more planning. The humans would be crushed before they could strike again. The full might of the Council's war machine would descend on their pathetic planet. This insult would be answered with overwhelming force. But the Council still did not understand. The attack on the outpost was not desperation. It was strategy. While they focused on Earth, more human ships were moving into position. Shadow Dancer was just one of 20 stealth frigates. Each had their own targets. Each was preparing to strike. On Earth, Admiral Daehyun received Hyunwoo's report. The attack had been a complete success. 0 casualties on the human side. Total destruction of the target. The kinetic weapons had performed perfectly. It was better than they had hoped. Daehyun immediately sent new orders to all stealth ships. They were to continue their attacks, hit supply lines, destroy isolated outposts, avoid major fleet concentrations. The goal was not to win head-on battles yet. The goal was to make the Council afraid, to show them that nowhere was safe. Captain Bora stood beside Daehyun as he issued the commands. She understood his strategy. The Council expected humans to defend Earth and wait for the attack. Instead, Earth was going on the offensive. They were bringing the war to the Council's territory. It would force the enemy to spread their forces to protect their own worlds. She asked if he thought the Council would fall for it. Daehyun smiled grimly. They already had. The Council was arrogant. They thought in terms of overwhelming force. They would mass their fleet and come straight for Earth. They would not expect harassment and guerrilla tactics. By the time they realized their mistake, it would be too late. Over the next few days, reports came in from across Council space. Another outpost destroyed. A supply convoy ambushed and annihilated. A communication relay turned to scrap. Each attack was swift and brutal. Each time, the human ships appeared from nowhere, struck and vanished. The Council's member species began to panic. If the mighty Council could not protect their own stations, how could they protect anyone? Some species started questioning whether this war was worth fighting. A few even began secret communications with Earth, asking about terms for peace. But Daehyun rejected all peace offers. Not yet. Earth needed to prove their strength beyond any doubt. They needed to show the galaxy that humans were not prey. They were predators, and they would accept nothing less than total victory. Back on Shadow Dancer, Hyunwoo and his crew prepared for their next mission. They had proven that human weapons could hurt the Council. Now they needed to prove that human warriors could not be stopped. The war was just beginning. and they intended to make sure the Council regretted ever threatening Earth. Jiwan plotted their next target. Another station, bigger than the last. More ships, heavier defenses. It would be dangerous. They might not all survive, but that was the price of freedom, and every person on Shadow Dancer was willing to pay it. General Taehyun stood before a massive holographic display showing 12 star systems. Each one glowed with markers indicating Council forces. Red icons showed their ships. Yellow showed their stations. Blue showed human forces moving into position. In 6 hours, Earth would launch the largest coordinated attack in human history. The strategy was bold to the point of insanity. While the Council massed their main fleet for an assault on Earth, human forces would strike everywhere else. 12 systems. 12 simultaneous attacks. The Council would be forced to choose between defending their territory or continuing their attack. Either way, Earth would seize the advantage. Taehyun had spent his entire career preparing for this moment. He had studied every major war in human history. He understood that victory did not always go to the strongest. It went to those who could adapt, who could think creatively, who could turn their weaknesses into strengths. The Council had numbers and experience, but Earth had desperation and ingenuity. In one of the targeted systems, Major Yoonji was leading ground forces onto a Council colony world. The planet held mining operations that supplied rare metals to the Council's shipyards. Taking it would cripple their ability to build new vessels, but the planet was defended by alien troops who had never lost a battle. Yoonji's transport ship descended through the atmosphere. Around her, 300 Marines checked their weapons and armor. They wore the new combat suits developed by Dr. Suman's team. Enhanced strength, built-in shields, integrated tactical systems. Each Marine was worth 10 normal soldiers. But Yoonji knew equipment was not enough. The Council's troops fought with discipline and followed their battle plans precisely. That was their weakness. They were predictable. Humans were not. Where the Council followed doctrine, humans improvised. Where aliens followed orders, humans adapted. The transport touched down outside the main mining complex. Immediately, alien defenders opened fire. Energy beams cut through the air. Explosions rocked the ground. 3 transports were hit and went down, but the rest deployed their troops successfully. Marines poured out and spread into attack formations. Yoonji led from the front. She sprinted across open ground, her suit's shields absorbing incoming fire. Behind her, her troops moved in coordinated chaos. They did not advance in neat lines like Council forces. They flowed like water, exploiting every piece of cover, supporting each other with instinctive teamwork. The alien defenders were confused. This was not how battles were supposed to work. Where were the organized formations? Where was the predictable advance? The humans seemed to be everywhere at once, hitting from unexpected angles, using tactics that made no sense according to Council military theory. Yoonji reached the perimeter wall and placed a breaching charge. The explosion tore through the reinforced metal. Her squad rushed through the gap. Inside, alien soldiers tried to mount a defense, but they were following a defensive plan written for conventional warfare. The humans ignored conventional warfare. While the main force engaged the defenders, smaller teams infiltrated through maintenance tunnels and ventilation shafts. They hit critical points, destroyed communications, sabotaged equipment. Within an hour, the mining complex was in chaos. The alien forces could not coordinate. Their careful plans fell apart. The same scene played out in 11 other systems. Human forces struck with speed and unpredictability. They used tactics the Council had never encountered. Feints and ambushes, guerrilla raids and lightning assaults. Every attack was different. Every engagement defied expectations. In orbit above the planet, Captain Sung-ho commanded the destroyer Relentless. His ship was one of 20 harassing the Council fleet trying to respond to Yoonji's ground assault. They could not match the enemy in direct combat. The Council ships were bigger and more heavily armed. So Sung-ho refused to fight directly. Instead, his ships struck and vanished. They used hit-and-run tactics that drove the Council commanders to distraction. Fire a volley, jump away, appear behind them, launch missiles, disappear again. The Council fleet spun in circles, trying to pin down an enemy that refused to stay still. Sung-ho had learned warfare in the streets before joining the military. He understood that a small, fast opponent could frustrate a larger one. You did not need to win the fight. You just needed to make the fight impossible to win, and that was exactly what he was doing. Back on Earth, Scientist Hanul was coordinating communications across all 12 battlefields. Her breakthrough in quantum entanglement had given human forces an incredible advantage. Every ship, every squad, every soldier was connected instantly. There was no lag, no delay. Commands and information flowed in real time. The Council used traditional communication systems. Their messages took time to travel between ships and fleets. By the time an order reached its destination, the situation had often changed. Human forces could respond instantly to new developments. It was like playing chess when you could move multiple pieces at once while your opponent could only move one at a time. Hanul monitored the battle reports flowing in. The mining world was secure. Major Unji had taken the complex with minimal casualties. In another system, a supply depot was destroyed. In a third, a council cruiser was crippled. Across the board, human forces were winning, but she also saw problems developing. In two systems, the council was rallying faster than expected. Human forces there were in danger of being overwhelmed. She immediately sent warnings and redirected reinforcements. Within minutes, ships jumped into those systems to provide support. The instant communication made all the difference. General Taehyun watched the overall situation from his command center. The offensive was succeeding beyond his best projections. Council forces were scattered and confused. Their chain of command was breaking down as different sectors demanded reinforcements. Best of all, their main fleet had stopped its advance on Earth and was turning back to defend Council territory. Admiral Daehyun entered the command center. He had been overseeing the space battles. His expression showed satisfaction. The Council's vaunted navy was proving vulnerable to human tactics. Their ships were powerful but inflexible. Their commanders followed established procedures. Humans threw the procedures out and did whatever worked. Daehyun reported that 6 Council cruisers had been destroyed or disabled. Twice that many smaller ships were gone. Human losses were light by comparison. 8 destroyers damaged, 2 frigates lost. It was a favorable exchange rate that would only get better as human forces gained experience. More importantly, the psychological impact was devastating to the Council. Their member species were watching humans fight with a ferocity they had never imagined. The Council had always won through overwhelming force. Now they were facing an enemy that refused to be overwhelmed, that turned every battle into chaos. Reports came in of Council species questioning their leaders. If the mighty Council could not defeat one primitive world, what good was the Council? Some species began withdrawing their ships. Others refused to send reinforcements. The political unity that had held the Council together for centuries was starting to crack. Back on the mining world, Major Yunji stood on the walls of the captured complex. The battle was over. Her Marines had secured all major facilities. Council troops who survived were fleeing into the wilderness. They would not return. The planet now belonged to Earth. She looked up at the alien sky. 2 moons hung above, both tinged red from the planet's unusual atmosphere. Somewhere up there, human ships were fighting to control the space around this world. And across the galaxy, her fellow soldiers were doing the same thing on other battlefields. Yunji had seen Council soldiers fight. They were brave enough. But they fought for orders and duty. Humans fought for survival and freedom. That difference made them unstoppable. When you had everything to lose, you would do anything to win. The Council was learning that lesson the hard way. Captain Sungho finally broke off his harassment of the Council fleet. They had spent hours chasing his ships without landing a single solid hit. Meanwhile, his destroyers had inflicted steady damage. 2 Council ships were limping away with critical systems offline. The rest were exhausted and low on ammunition. He ordered his fleet to jump out and regroup. As space twisted around relentless, he allowed himself a small smile. The Council had expected an easy victory over primitive humans. Instead, they had found warriors who refused to lose. And this was just the beginning. General Taehyun looked at the updated display. All 12 operations had succeeded. Every objective was taken or destroyed. Human forces were withdrawing in good order with their objectives complete. The Council's strategic position had gone from strong to questionable in a single day. He turned to Admiral Daehyun. The tide had turned. Earth was no longer defending desperately. They were on the offensive, and the Council was scrambling to respond. The question now was not if humans would survive. The question was how much territory they would take before the Council surrendered. Fleet Admiral Ji-young stood on the bridge of the flagship Indomitable as it entered orbit around the Council's capital world. Behind her ship came the entire human fleet. Destroyers, cruisers, carriers, and the massive dreadnoughts that had been unveiled only weeks ago. They were here to accept the Council's surrender. It had taken 4 months of brutal warfare to reach this point. 4 months of battles across dozens of systems. The Council had fought hard, but they had never adapted to human tactics. They kept using the same strategies, expecting different results. Each time, human forces found new ways to exploit their rigidity. The turning point had come when Project Infinity was deployed. A Council fleet of 200 ships had gathered for one final assault on Earth. Dr. Suman's superweapon had met them halfway. One shot, just one, the entire fleet simply ceased to exist, torn apart at the molecular level. The demonstration had broken the Council's will to fight. After that, Council member species began surrendering individually. Some switched sides entirely, offering to join Earth's coalition. Others simply withdrew from the war and closed their borders. Within weeks, the mighty Galactic Council that had ruled for centuries was reduced to a handful of worlds, desperately seeking peace. Ji-young received a communication from the planet below. The Council was ready to meet. They would accept any terms Earth offered. They had no choice. Their fleets were destroyed. Their allies had abandoned them. They could not fight anymore. Pride was a luxury they could no longer afford. Diplomat Min-Su stood beside Ji-young, reviewing the terms one final time. Earth's demands were not gentle. The Council would be dissolved. Their military would be dismantled. The species that had led the Council would pay reparations. Most importantly, humanity would take a permanent seat on whatever government replaced the Council. But Earth would not enslave or exterminate the Council species. That would make humans no better than the Council itself. Instead, there would be a new order in the galaxy, one based on mutual respect rather than domination. Species would be judged by their actions, not their military power, and Earth would ensure that order was maintained. Min-Su had spent his life believing that all conflicts could be resolved through dialogue. This war had challenged that belief. Sometimes talking was not enough. Sometimes violence was the only language tyrants understood. He had learned that the hard way, but he had also learned that after the violence ended, someone had to build the peace. The shuttle descended toward the Council's assembly hall. It was a massive structure built to impress and intimidate. For centuries, conquered species had come here to submit. Today, it was the Council's turn to submit. Ji-young found a certain justice in that. The shuttle landed and Ji-young stepped out, followed by Min-Su and an honor guard of Marines. Commander Heejin led the guards. She had been with Ji-young since the war's first days. Her ship had been one of the stealth frigates that struck the initial blow. She had earned the right to be here at the end. They walked through corridors lined with alien guards who would not meet their eyes. The Council members waited in their great chamber. The same 3 aliens who had delivered the ultimatum to Admiral Daehyun sat on their high thrones. But now they looked small and defeated. Their arrogance had been burned away by human fury. Ji-young did not waste time with speeches or gloating. She stated Earth's terms clearly and simply. The Council would dissolve. Their weapons would be destroyed. They would pay reparations in technology and resources. They would help build the new galactic government. Or Earth would continue the war until nothing of the Council remained. The Council members agreed to everything. They had no choice and they knew it. Min-Su presented the formal documents. One by one, the Council members placed their marks on the surrender. It was done. The war was over. Earth had won. As they left the assembly hall, Heejin asked Ji-young how she felt. The Admiral was quiet for a long moment. She felt relief that the killing was over. She felt pride in what humanity had accomplished. But she also felt the weight of all those who had not survived to see this day. Victory had not been free. They returned to Indomitable and began the journey back to Earth. Along the way, they passed human outposts on worlds that had been Council territory. Marines stood guard over cities. Engineers rebuilt infrastructure. Diplomats negotiated with local populations. Earth was not just winning a war. They were building an empire. Ji-young worried about that. Empires had a way of becoming what they fought against. Today, Earth was liberating species from Council tyranny. But what about tomorrow? What about in 50 years or 100? Would humans remember why they fought? Or would they become the new oppressors? She shared her concerns with Min-Su. The diplomat nodded slowly. He understood. That was why the new galactic government had to be built on different principles. Not rule by the strongest, but government by consensus. Not domination, but cooperation. It would not be easy. It might not even work. But they had to try. When Indomitable entered Earth's solar system, they found a fleet waiting to greet them. Every available ship had gathered to welcome the victors home. Admiral Daehyun's flagship led the formation. Behind it came vessels from dozens of species that had joined Earth's cause during the war. Ji-young stood at attention as Indomitable passed between the rows of ships. Each one fired ceremonial salutes. Lights flashed. Crews cheered over open channels. This was humanity's moment. They had faced extinction and refused to yield. They had fought against impossible odds and won. The galaxy would never forget. On Earth, President Minho waited at the landing site. The entire planet was celebrating. Cities that had prepared for destruction now erupted in joy. People danced in the streets. Strangers embraced. For the first time in months, humanity could breathe without fear. The shuttle carrying Ji-young and the other senior officers landed. They stepped out to thunderous applause. Cameras captured every moment. This footage would be shown for generations. The day Earth's defenders came home victorious. But Ji-young insisted on one thing before any celebration. She wanted to visit the memorial. In the months since the war began, a monument had been built to honor those who died. Thousands of names were carved into black stone. Pilots who never returned. Marines who fell in battle. Civilians killed in council raids. She walked along the memorial wall with Hyejin at her side. Both of them had lost friends whose names were carved here. Victory was sweet, but it had been bought with blood. These people had given everything so that humanity could remain free. They deserved to be remembered. General Tae-hyun joined them at the memorial. He had aged visibly during the war. The responsibility of sending people to die had taken its toll. But he stood straight and proud. Every death had been necessary. Every sacrifice had meaning. Because they had won, and freedom was worth any price. That evening, the victory ceremony was held. Representatives from all of Earth's nations gathered. The allied species that had joined humanity's cause sent delegations. Even some former council species attended, eager to make peace with the new power in the galaxy. President Minho gave the main speech. He talked about courage and sacrifice. He talked about unity and determination. But most importantly, he talked about the future. The war had shown what humanity could do when threatened. Now they had to show what they could do with peace. Earth would help rebuild what the war destroyed. They would share technology with species that had suffered under council rule. They would establish trade and diplomatic relations across the galaxy. Most importantly, they would work to create a government that prevented anyone from ever threatening others the way the council had threatened Earth. Dr. Suman sat in the audience, uncomfortable with all the attention. Her weapons had won the war, but she took no joy in that. Too many had died. She had already begun converting military technology to peaceful uses. The kinetic accelerators could be used for mining. The stealth systems could protect merchant ships. Project Infinity would be dismantled entirely. Admiral Daehyun watched the ceremony with mixed feelings. They had won, but at what cost? Thousands of ships destroyed, tens of thousands of lives lost, entire worlds scarred by battle. Yes, it was necessary. Yes, they had no choice. But that did not make the cost any easier to bear. Captain Bora found him after the ceremony. She could see the burden he carried. She reminded him that everyone who fought had chosen to fight. No one had been forced. They all understood what was at stake. And because of his leadership, most of them had survived. That was something to be proud of. As the celebrations continued into the night, Ji-young stood on a balcony overlooking the city. Lights blazed everywhere. Music filled the air. People laughed and danced. This was what they had fought for. Not conquest or glory, but the simple right to live free. The galaxy had learned something important. Humanity would not be threatened. They would not be enslaved. They would not bow to anyone. And now, with the war over, they would show the galaxy something else. Humans were more than just warriors. They were builders, dreamers, explorers. They would create a future worth all the sacrifices made to reach it. The age of the Galactic Council was over. The age of humanity had begun, and the stars themselves would bear witness to what humans would accomplish now that they were free to reach for them.